The worst enemy to creativity is self-doubt. Sylvia Plath. Welcome to Deep Dive Creatives, a podcast that explores the creative process. I'm David McGinnis, host of Deep Dive Creatives. Please take a moment to hit that subscribe or follow button. That helps to promote the podcast and lets you know when the next episode is available. Also, leave a comment. What are your thoughts about the creative process? That helps to promote the podcast as well as encourages conversations about creativity. Meet Molly, Gracida Beach.
Sometimes I would feel like I would have customers that were a little more specific in their designs, and I would always stress out like, oh my gosh, what if I don't do what they wanted? What if they go and pick up the cake and they absolutely hate it?
Molly officially started her cake decorating business called Molly's Sweets in September of 2024. She concurrently started an Instagram channel with that same name. And as of publishing this podcast, the Instagram channel has close to 30,000 followers. Molly predominantly grew up in the Pacific Northwest. But on a missions trip she took to Mexico, she met a young gentleman whom she fell in love with and got married to, and now makes her home in San Antonio de la Minas, Baja California, Mexico. Her cake decorating business began by making cakes for her children's birthday parties and special occasions, which soon caught the attention of her neighbors.
I started baking cakes just for my kids, just for their birthday parties and stuff, and then my neighbors started to see that I was making these little cakes for my kids, and so they started asking me. They were like, hey, could you make my kids' cake for me? And I was like, well, I'm not a professional, and they wanted to pay me for it, and so I would just say, well, pay me just for the ingredients, and I'll make a cake. And so I would do that just a few times a year, and I realized that I was taking a lot of time because every time I had to go and make a cake, I had to go out into town to buy the ingredients, and then I would have to stress out about like fitting it into my schedule just because I didn't do it very often. So I was like, well, what if I started posting about it online and just advertising that I make cakes and seeing if I could start making more cakes and make it kind of worth my time to go into town and buy enough ingredients. And so that's kind of how it started. Just people started asking me for them little by little, and then I started loving it, and it went from like 1 cake a week into now it's like 10 cakes a week sometimes.
Molly had a deep desire to have a creative outlet, an outlet that would nurture that creative spirit in her. But as a wife and a mother of 2, she knew that this would be a bit of a balancing act.
I love being a mom, and that was always my goal, and my idea was to be a stay-at-home mom and to not have to send my kids to daycare, and I want to be able to homeschool them because we do live in Mexico, and I want to be able to teach them English and Spanish. And so that was my priority, was to make sure that my kids come first, and also, the household, and because my husband works full-time. But I also wanted to be able to do something that is kind of like, have a creative outlet. I love having something that's mine, that's like my creative outlet, and I get to kind of be in charge of it, and that's kind of apart from taking care of my kids.
As Molly unpacks her thoughts about creativity and the creative process, you will be inspired as you continue your own journey down the wild and untamed path of creativity. Let's dive in.
I would define creativity as being, I think it's a lot of different things. I used to think of it as mainly just being able to come up with an idea in your head and being able to execute it. But the more I got into my business of learning that there are different types of creativity, because sometimes I have an idea that isn't clear in my head. There are things that I come up with, like I really want to do a specific thing, but I can't picture it in my mind until I start doing it. And so I think sometimes creativity is just being able to go with the flow and come up with solutions to problems just quickly. And when you're in a moment of like, I don't know what to do, just kind of just doing it and figuring it out as you go a little bit. And I think for me, that has been my form of creativity, is just doing it as you go, kind of instead of having a clear picture in my head, just going for it and trying it and starting it and seeing what happens. My creative process is to procrastinate. It's not the best way to go, but it is the only way that I can do it. My clients, I have two different types of clients. I have people that will text me and say, I want a cake and it needs to be maybe blue or pink or whatever, and then you do whatever you want. I know that you'll make it pretty. And so then I get to come up with the design on my own. And when it's like that, I cannot picture an idea in my head. I cannot do it. If I have asked for a cake a week before, it's not until the day of that I am able to clearly know what the design is going to be. I have to get the cake started, and then I'm able to kind of start going, and then I can see, okay, this is what I want to do, and go with it. And then I also have clients who will send me kind of a specific picture and say, hey, could you make this cake as close to this picture as possible? And even though that isn't as creative on my part, I think I still have to be creative in my way of executing the cake. When I come up with the colors that I want to make the colors, I have to mix the colors. You're not just given a picture of a cake and then the exact instructions of, oh, you need to use this specific color and you need to use this specific icing tip. And so I think in that way too, I'm still able to be creative in figuring out, okay, I need to mix these colors together and a little bit of this color, and then I need to use this icing tip to get this look that is like the design that the customer wants. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of how the steps are so that I can explain myself. So when you make a cake, you start by doing what's called the crumb coat. And so you stack your cake and you fill it, and then you just do kind of like a white coat to keep all of the crumbs in. And then you do a final coat, which is the final color of the cake, whether it's white or blue or pink. And then you get to do the decorating, which is like piping onto the cake, adding any sprinkles, any designs, any flowers, or if it's like a kid's cake, you'll add the characters. And so my favorite step is that very last step, when you're adding the final piping, the final design, the final touches, and you really get to see the cake come together. And in my opinion, that's when you really get to be creative. I love doing flower cakes and just adding all of the little flowers onto the cake and just kind of not knowing what it's going to turn out until you add the final touches. And then at the very end, I always like spin my little cake board around and I get to see the full cake. And that to me is always really exciting because I always get to be kind of like, I'm surprised by the final cake as well, because sometimes I don't know how it's going to turn out until I'm completely done. I was inspired to work with cakes mainly by my mom, because my mom made cakes for us when we were growing up. She always made our birthday cakes, and she maybe didn't have all of the really cool tools that she needed. She didn't have any of the supplies, but she always came up with a theme for us and executed something that was just really fun. And as a kid, we always were super excited when she would make like a bunk bed cake for us, or she would make like a really cool basketball court for my brothers. And so part of that was like, I really wanted to make things like that for my kids, because I have such beautiful memories of my mom making special cakes and special birthdays for us. I wanted to do the same thing for my kids. And so that's how it really started, was I was inspired by her and by what she had done, and I wanted to do that for my own kids as well. I want them to have memories of really exciting cakes and really exciting parties and stuff like that. And then I was also just inspired by people on the internet. I think it's really cool that people are willing to put their stuff out onto the online and post things on Instagram and on Pinterest and on YouTube, and I would watch those videos, and I love watching the process of people when they're making their cakes, because it's so cool to see their creative process and how their minds are working. And I love it when people talk through what they're doing, like, oh, I did this because of this and this. And that's part of the reason I started posting videos as well, because I love watching those kind of things, and those really inspired me to go and try it on my own. And so I was like, well, maybe if I post it, other people can get inspired too. The people that I get inspiration from, specifically from like online and stuff, there is a girl, her name is Nancy Bajo, and she works in Mexico and lives in Mexico. And so I started to watch her videos, and it was really exciting. First of all, I learned like all of the terminology for cake making in Spanish from her. She taught me a lot of stuff because I do make my cakes in Mexico and I do sell them to Mexicans. And so I wanted to learn specifically from people who work and live in Mexico to see if there was specific things that people liked there, flavors, designs. And so that's one of the people that I really was drawn towards to watch her videos and stuff. And online, there's another girl on Instagram. Her name is Ale, and she just posts music, and she posts herself making the cakes, and it's just the most like relaxing thing to watch. And I would watch it, and she makes it look so easy, and I was like, oh, I want to learn how to do that. I want my cakes to look that beautiful, and I want to make it look as easy as she does. Some of the challenges that I faced was I would stress out about what a design was going to look like or how I was going to execute a specific thing that a client would want. Sometimes I would feel like I would have customers that were a little more specific in their designs, and I would always stress out like, oh my gosh, what if I don't do what they wanted? What if they go and pick up the cake and they absolutely hate it? And so I would kind of worry, and I would stress myself out, and I would start to spiral into like, what if I can't do this? And I realized that I kind of had to just be at peace about it. I had to take time, sometimes at night, just like kind of close my brain off a little bit and like watch a movie and forget about it, and then start from scratch in the morning and start to think about it. Because I realized that the more I stressed out about it, I wasn't, the more my brain was kind of like closing off. I wasn't gonna get more creative. I wasn't gonna come up with the right answer. I wasn't gonna magically have the idea of what I wanted the cake to look like pop into my head. And so sometimes it would just take just kind of procrastinating a little bit, in the sense of like just stopping and trying to not think about it for a little bit, and then starting as soon as I get the cakes out, as soon as I start filling them and I have them crumb coated and ready to go to have the final coat and the final design on, that's when everything kind of starts to work out the way I want it to work out. And that's when my brain kind of like gets a little clearer, and I'm able to see, okay, the main part of the cake is done. All I have to do now is add on the details and the final touches. And so now I just have to worry about this. And so it's kind of just learning to take it one step at a time, and learning to really space myself out so that I don't get too overwhelmed, because when I get overwhelmed, it's when my brain is just like, nope, you have no idea what you're doing. I've definitely had times when things haven't worked out, when cakes have just gone wrong. I feel like the more I've done it, the more I have been able to kind of quickly pivot and say, okay, this is really not working. It's not looking good. I can tell this isn't going to turn out the way I want. Okay, we're going to go and try a different design. We're going to just completely pivot and do something different. But there are times when people want, like I said, when people want something really specific, and I have to make it work. I have to figure it out. I have to get through it. If in the case that a cake turns out really, really bad, and I'm not proud of my work, I consider it a failure, I consider it ugly or whatever, I'll offer my clients a discount. I'll say, hey, you know what? This cake didn't turn out the way I wanted, or it's not to my standards, which usually my standards for myself are a little higher than what the client's standards are. But there have been times when I will finish a cake. I think only about 2 times I've ever had to do this, where I'll finish a cake, I'll look at it, and I'm like, oh, you know what? It's not my favorite. I don't think it's my best work, but it's time to, the customer's going to come pick it up anyway. I don't have any time to redo it. And so I'll offer them a discount. I'll say, hey, you know what? This isn't my best work, and so I'm going to give you a discount. And I haven't lost any clients that way. I haven't had anybody say like, oh, you know what? You don't know how to make cakes. Usually it's all in my head too. Usually because I'm just staring at a cake for so long, or because I know what I'm capable of. I judge myself, or I criticize myself too much. But if something isn't working or it doesn't turn out, then I do have the option of saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to give you a little discount so that you're not paying full price for this cake, so that hopefully you'll order another cake from me in the future. The thing that motivates me the most to keep going is looking back on my work from the past. So I started in September of 2024. Officially selling my cakes. But before that, years before that, I had also made cakes every once in a while. I'd made cakes for my kids. I'd made cakes for friends. And so when I go back and I look at pictures of those cakes, I'm like, oh my goodness, that is not a good cake. And at the time, I was really proud of that work. At the time, I thought it was great. And so I know the cakes that I'm making now, they're only going to get better. The more I do it, it's only going to get easier, and it's going to get better. And maybe the cakes that I make now, when I look at it and I'm like, wow, these are amazing. Maybe in a couple of years, I'm going to really dislike them. Maybe in a couple of years, I'll look back and be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I thought that was good. But I definitely think, looking at the progress that I have been able to make just in a few months, I can look at pictures of my work and videos of my work and see wow, I have progressed and I have gotten better. the creative, like being creative comes easier to me now. I'm able to just say, oh, you know what, I can do that and just mix some colors and slap on some stuff and it turns out good because I've done it so much now that it gets easier and easier as I go. And so I definitely want to keep going and see if I can, like, how much better I can get and how much more I can learn as I go. Yeah, I would say that my philosophy for when it comes to my business and to my cake making is to try to be a team with my clients and my customers as much as possible. And so I try to do as close to what they want as possible, but also try to add a little bit of my creative style into it as well, so that it's something that they're pleased with, but something that I can also be proud of too, that I'm not saying, oh, I have to make that cake, but it's really ugly. So I try to put my own little touch on it as much as possible, just add a little bit of my flair so that I'm proud of my cake, but also make sure that I'm still making my customers happy and my clients happy. I have a girl who comes and she always orders her cakes from me, and she'll send me a picture of a cake she wants, but then she always tells me, she goes, but just add a little bit of your touch to it so that it's a little different. And so I love that. I love when they are trusting me to be able to make something that they want, but just to make it a little bit of my way and a little bit of their way. Some of my goals for my business is to start online classes teaching other people how to make cakes. I'm a baker and a decorator, but decorating is definitely my favorite part and the part that I feel like is my strength when it comes to cake making. And so I would love to teach other people how to decorate cakes. One of my favorite things to do is to do cakes that have floral designs on it. So lots of different like piping little flowers on cakes. And I'd love to teach people how to do that because I feel like even though you teach somebody how to do it, they don't have to copy your exact design. They get to go and make a design that's a little bit different because none of the cakes are the same. They're all different. So teach them how to get started, and then they get to take it from there and they get to be creative on their own as well. I think anybody could learn to do, specifically cake making, I think anybody could learn, because when I started, I wasn't good at it. It was just something that every time I made a new cake, I got better and better and better. I think it's something that with practice you can get better, and with being creative too, I think the more you start, like maybe when you start, you have to look at a picture of a cake and do that exact design. And then maybe the next time you can add one little extra thing. And then maybe eventually after you've done a lot, you can, in your mind, you're like, oh, well, I can add this and I can add this. And the creative part gets easier as well because you kind of know different ways to make it still look good, but you can add lots of different things. I think one of the threats to being creative, specifically in cake making, could be perfection, especially when you look at Pinterest or even with AI these days. They have a lot of these very, very perfect cakes that when you're beginning and when you're starting out, your cake is not going to look like that. My cakes still don't look like that, and I can still even get down on myself when I try to make a cake. And then I look at a cake on Pinterest and I'm like, oh, well, I have a bubble on my cake, or I have a line, or it's not perfect, it's not exact. And so I think one of the threats that can really discourage people, and it even can discourage me sometimes, is trying to be perfect. And when it doesn't come out perfect, it can be really disappointing and you can really get down on yourself. And specifically, like, we're always hardest on ourselves because we're looking at the product that we make and we're examining it. And so I'll make something and I'll look at it and I can see all of the little mistakes and all the little errors I make. But if I show it to somebody else, they don't see those mistakes usually. They usually can't see all of the errors. And so sometimes it's just learning how to accept what it is and just keep trying and trying to get better. Obviously, we want to strive to make it as perfect as possible because we want it to be beautiful, but not being discouraged by the internet or by pictures online or by people who have been doing it for years and years and years, because obviously it's not going to be perfect the first time, and especially when you're beginning, it takes time. Some words of inspiration that I would give to anybody and everybody is to just start. If you want to make cakes and you want to design cakes, just bake a cake and just do it, or find an excuse to do it. It's like, oh, it's my kid's birthday, I'm going to make their cake. Instead of buying a cake from somebody else, I'm going to do it and I'm going to try. And that applies not only to cake making, but to any hobby or anything, any job that somebody wants to do, is to just put your foot out the door and try. You have to start somewhere, because you can't just look at other people's things, other people's videos, other people's content and say, oh, I would wish I could do that, but I could never do that, if you've never tried it before. And I was always scared to post my work online because I thought that it wasn't good enough, and I thought no one was going to order a cake from me. I thought no one was going to watch my videos. But I realized that if I had never done that, if I had always said, oh, you know what, in 5 years when I get better, then I'll start selling cakes. In 5 years, I still wasn't going to be good because I wasn't trying. I wasn't practicing. I was never making cakes. When was I going to make 10 cakes a week? I was going to make 10 cakes a week for myself. And so as soon as I just did it, I started my page, and as soon as I had posted my first video, and it was scary for me, but that's when I started getting orders, and that's when I started to actually make a lot of cakes and work really hard, and that's when I learned. And so one thing that for me that I've just realized is you just kind of have to shoot your shot, and you just have to do it. And it may fail. You may fail sometimes, and you just have to be willing to accept failure, be willing to accept that it's not perfect, that people are understanding. You know, you don't have to go all out on your first time. You could just, like I made cakes, and when I first started, I would just charge people the cost of ingredients just so that I could practice, and nobody expected them to be perfect. It was just, hey, let me just practice, and I'll try, I'll do the best. And that's kind of how I learned and how I got started.